knocker, you've got to know what's the tools, the strategies, the systems that you're going to need in order to go be successful in this industry. So in this course, we're going to go through what to do on the streets, on the doorstep, and immediately when they open the door. There's systems and strategies and techniques that I'm going to answer common questions in this course that is going to really give you the tools you need to be really successful. So follow along. We're going to go first on what do you do in the streets? And then what do you do on the doorstep? And then what do you do when they actually open the door? Up with whatever excuse to get out of knocking. And the biggest thing that I've seen managing hundreds of salespeople is the failure to prepare. And what do I mean is, you might have forgot to charge your iPad or your phone, and come 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you're like, oh, how do I submit a deal when my iPad's dead? And what that'll do is give you an excuse to go to McDonald's, sit there for 3 hours, waiting for it to charge, then go home. And why knock if you don't have your phone? And so this gives you, and that compounded over time, you're losing a lot of daylight, a lot of time to actually make deals. So charge your phone, charge your iPad, bring a power bank, have your snacks, have your water, have eaten, have your shoes, have your everything you need to have in a row, your folders, your materials, your, all the stuff, so that when you go out onto the doors, you're not sitting there saying, oh, I got to get off the doors because I failed to prepare. That is one of the biggest tools for success. Atomic Habits by James Clear. If you can get in the habit of answering the simple question of where and when you should be doing what, it's going to help you actually just go on autopilot versus getting into what we call decision fatigue, where you're sitting there going, where should I knock? When should I go out? Should I go out at 3 or should I go out at 6? Should I go out at 2 or should I go home at 9? Like you don't know, but if you simply have predetermined where you're starting, meaning I'm going to start on Cherry and 2nd Street at 204 Cherry, right? Like exactly the first home you're going to knock. And you know when you're going to knock it, and it's at 2 o'clock or 12 o'clock or 3 o'clock or whatever that time is, and you stick to that, and you're a man of your word or a woman of your word, so you know that this is where you're going to be. You don't have to fumble around where we should start and what area should we go to and where should I be, and you're not asking yourself all those questions. So this is just every morning you know when and where you should be, and let's go. Okay, so now you're in area. There is a swagger you need to have. You need to treat this area like it's yours, like you own this turf. You are the manager of this turf, more so than maybe even the homeowners in that turf. You know more people, you have more, mission in that area. Like you're a man on a mission and you're ready to go take over the world. That's how you need to be walking. So let's talk about some basic things of what that actually means. Where do you walk? So are you walking right down the middle of the road like I own this place? That's a technique. That's a power move. Are you zigzagging, or are you kind of where are you going, right? So ask yourself, if I owned this turf, am I going to sit there and dance around and be all insecure about where I am, who I am, what yard I'm walking through, etc.? Or am I just I'm moving through the neighborhood. Let's take a car's driving by me. I'm not head down avoid oh, I'm a door knocker. I don't want them to see me. It's more hey, you'll see me in a minute. I'll be at your door eventually, right? So that's my attitude. Let's say somebody's mowing their yard. You're waving. You're high-fiving. You're hey, Tiffany, what's up? You become the cool kid on the block. You want to also be putting buzz with your customers in the neighborhood Facebook pages or the Nextdoor apps, things like that. So you want to have social presence and buzz. You want to be doing your own social media swagger where you're dude, I freaking look at the signs. I've sold those homes, that home, that home. That's going to create mental confidence on your Instagram stories or whatever. Then you've also got walking through yards. I'm okay walking through yards. I found time efficiency. I'm not afraid of that. Some people want to be a little bit more respectable, walk around. You also have things what you're listening to. So I actually had one of those neck headphones or streamed up headphones in my shirt, And in between doors, I'd throw on some sweet beats and I'd be jamming and I'd be pumping myself up. And then a second they open the door, I'm like throwing it behind my back so they don't see it, obviously. But I've got this new state, I've got this control that I feel excitement in between doors. So when you're in a neighborhood, you got to feel like, man, I own this. This is my hood, and walk around with some swagger. Signs of life simply is don't knock the doors where people aren't home. Now, every area is a little different. You might have elderly demographics where you know people are home more. You might be in like cookie cutter, like middle class neighborhood where everyone's at work until 6. So you've got to figure out, okay, what's the area I'm knocking? And then making sure that you're knocking the doors you assume people are home and skipping the ones that aren't. So if you know they park outside, meaning they have tire marks outside, oil stains in the driveway, and both cars are missing, why would you go waste your time standing at their doorstep for 45 seconds and then go to the next doorstep? Skip it, mark that down as a comeback when you see the cars out front. So making sure that you're pacing a neighborhood with speed and getting in front of people is how you make money. It's not about how many doors you knocked, it's how many interactions you had. And I think a lot of people in this space, they get all obsessed with, I knock every door, where a true door knocker knows how to assess. Are there blinds open? Are there lights on the porch? Are there cars in the driveway, the garage? Are you looking at tire marks going into the garage, out of the garage? Are there garages in the back? So that's a little tougher, right? Do they have an alleyway in the back? Are you looking for, like areas that have different like age groups, shift workers, things like that? So knock people that are there. That's how you make sales. You don't make sales walking around a neighborhood. So many people think knocking in the dark is wrong. I hate to break it to you. If you're knocking in the winter and you're in Alaska, you've only got like 3 hours of daylight. So what are you going to do? Do people fall asleep at 6 o'clock when it gets dark in the winter? No. They are still just doing normal life. It just happens to be dark outside. Because you knock in the dark, does that mean you're a burglar? Does that mean you're robbing their home? No. So if you think I have to stop knocking when it's dark, you're wrong. And if you don't overcome that mindset, you're cutting yourself short. You're now taking away your paychecks. It is your paycheck we're talking about. So be the guy that's going to knock past dark, that's going to knock into the wee hours of the night, and it is okay. Now, when you get to 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, now you're talking a little bit like aggressive. Like I wouldn't go that far, but I would say, people are still awake up until 9 o'clock. It's okay to knock their doors at that point. So be sensitive to the fact that it's dark. Maybe bring up an icebreaker. Say, hey, is it cool if we flip on a light? Look for lights, porch lights, lights on inside, but knocking in the dark is a normal thing. Time. You're going to have dogs going buck wild, wanting to run across the street and chase the bunny rabbits. You're going to have kids that are like, mommy, mommy, mommy. And you're just going to be like, I'm trying to sell you right now. So if you don't know how to deal with the dogs and kids, you're actually going to be shooting yourself in the foot. You're going to be losing deals that may have been really interested customers, but due to circumstance, they're not going to buy because they're so bugged at what's going on in their environment. So you have to be a steward and take control of the situation. So let's talk about dogs first. If I have dogs jumping up and down, they're sitting there holding the dog back. They're like, well, he's going to run. He's going to run. Like, I need to say, okay, ma'am, it's cool. Go put him in the back, or let's just shut the door and put him inside so you're not sitting there with your arm tired trying to hold your dog back. So I'm literally leading them. I'm saying, hey, let's just step outside real quick so that way he's not barking. Or let's step 30 feet out onto the driveway so we don't hear his bark, right? Because that might be a distraction just from a noise. So this is important, just a way you take control of the situation. Kids, they might be holding kid and it's screaming and crying. You could say, hey, it's cool. You be dealing with that. I'm super used to it. You know, I've got kids, or oh, my nieces and nephews just like that, or whatever that is. And you got to acknowledge that fact and then let them feel comfortable, because they might feel uncomfortable, like, I'm so sorry, I can't control my kid crying or whatever, right? So you've got to say like, hey, is it cool if we step in? That way you can sit down and you can, you know, you can like handle this, and I'll just explain it while you kind of, you take this. Or, you know, you've got to sit there and take the lead versus just be like, I'm going to ignore the fact that your kid's crying, dogs are barking, and I'm just going to go on with my normal pitch. And I've watched many reps do that, and I'm like, say something that's happening, like take charge. There are times where you're going to have to just say, I'll come back in 30. That's okay. I'm going to be working your neighbors. And you got to read the situation and figure out the personality of the customer. Just be like, hey, sorry I caught you at the worst time ever. I'll come back in like 20, 30 minutes. Is that cool? And then they're going to be even more responsive when you're coming back, because they're like, oh, I know you. You were just here. Come on in. Now you're not a pest, you're a guest. And that's really how you deal with the dogs and kids. You've heard a lot of different types of knocks, right? So the question is like, how do you knock? A lot of people are like, this is all personal preference, but my whole thing is don't make it some like weird phony thing. Like maybe you can get goofy with it if you're in a goofy mood, but I wouldn't get so caught up on that. What I would get caught up on is the intensity of the knock. It's important to knock as if you're in charge. Now, a lot of people knock like this. Like if I'm sitting upstairs in my bedroom, I don't hear that. Like just plain and simple. You want to make the knock to where it's like, I'm here. I'm not afraid that I am here. Come to the door. You need to be calling them to the door. That's the purpose of a knock. Next, ring. So if I ring the doorbell, there's probably 30% of doorbells that don't work. So just keep that in mind. You're like, why aren't they coming? Like nobody's home. Like the doorbell might have not worked. So the first thing is listen for the doorbell. And then the second thing is knock after ringing, just in case the doorbell didn't ring. And you know, a ring is a very important thing. The next one would be ring doorbells or video doorbells. And this is a common thing we're running into today. It's like, do I ring the doorbell? I know they're seeing me. What if they talk to me through the video doorbell? Like what do we do, right? So my first advice would be don't ring the doorbell, knock. And why I say that is because most people's pre-programmed answer to a knock is go to door. Their pre-programmed answer to a video door, like to the video doorbell, is a notification on their phone and it pulls up. But if they knock, their predetermined response is not to be like, knock, oh, let me pull out my phone, open the notification that didn't happen. You know what I mean? Like it's a little bit more of resistance if they had to actually, like they're not thinking about their phone. They're like, oh, knock, I better go answer door. That's just like what are pre-programmed in a human's minds. So the first step would be just knock. The second step would be ring the doorbell. So we ring the doorbell and there's two things that happen. Either they come to the door and they answer the door, or they come over the intercom and they start talking to me through the doorbell. So if they come to the door and answer the door, let's go to the pitch. If they go through the doorbell, there's two approaches I can take. One is I can take the approach of, I'm not pitching you anything. I'm going to kind of play dumb and I'm going to just try to get you to come to door, or set up time to where I can actually talk to you like a human being face to face. So the approach would simply be like this. Hey, no, and you can play the game. You can say, okay, cool, I might have a bad connection. Like you can literally say, I mean, I've done a lot of fun things with the video doorbell just to mess with people, and you can go that route. Obviously, you're on film, represent your company well, don't be an idiot. But you know, you can mess with people, you could make jokes, you could like the goal is to say, hey, I'm a human being. Can we talk face to face? But they might be at work. That might be the case. That is a cool feature. I couldn't catch you, now I'm catching you. So now my goal would be like, hey, let's set up an appointment for when you get home. And they're like, what's this about? The goal is to give them enough information for them to create curiosity and get them to come talk to you at night or that day or right now. And if you give too much and you try to go through your whole spiel via doorbell, I've yet to see many people sign contracts, finish documents, get paid through a doorbell. So if you give too much, they might be like, oh, that's fine, not interested. And now you're like, okay, now what do I do? And if that happens, that's not to say maybe I see a light on and car in the driveway. I might come back and knock in person and be like, hey, I was the guy. Oh, I told you not interested. I know, but, and now you go into your pitch. That's not a bad approach. But so that's kind of video doorbells. And the next thing would be gates. So you got to be really careful. The reason why people have gates and fences and things like that is because of one, they have a big dog that they want to protect you and them. And two, they want to keep people out. So you've got to think through like, okay, is the gate locked or is it unlocked? So my approach is whistle. Okay, I don't hear any dogs chasing after me. Let's check to see if it's locked. So the gate might only be there for when they let the dog out. Maybe it's not there all the time, right? So the dog's inside or he's locked up, whatever. So now I'm going to open the gate, I'm going to walk in, I'm going to go knock the actual door. So enter at your own risk, right? But that would be the strategy there. Let's say the gate's locked. You could take the approach of, I lived in Argentina for 2 years. So in Argentina, the standard is you clap. And hey, you're yelling, right? And then the other approach would be try a different door or wait until you see garage open or cars coming in and you're trying to catch them as they're coming or going would be the other approach too, is if you have no alternative. But your goal is to obviously talk to human beings. The next one is the storm door, or the door that you cannot see through, we'll call this. And in some markets, these are like every home, and they are the worst thing on the planet. In some markets, you won't find these very often. But essentially it is, I have my front door, and then I have a door in front of it that is like a metal door with a lot of little holes in it, and you can't see through it, but they can see you. So these are for security purposes or storms and things like that. So what you would do, my first approach would be, do not try to sell them through door. Let me repeat, do not try to sell them the invisible man behind door. So I might take an approach of like, hello? They're like, I'm right here. I can hear you. I can see you. It's like, I can't, like, hello? And I'm playing this like almost intentional stupidity to say, open the door. Like I don't talk to a human being, have the decency of talking to me like a human being. And so the other approach is I might step way back, like way back. I know they open, I'm like 20 feet back. That's going to force them to open the other door, come out to you, and that's another strategy. The other strategy is you grab something in your hand and you turn it sideways vertical so they can't see what's on the paper or Slick or iPad, and I'm going to force it into door jam that they're going to feel like they have to open door to take whatever's in my hand, and now I'm just going to show it to them. I'm not necessarily going to give it to them. Does that make sense? So I call this term knifing, and this is a very good technique also with the glass doors or a screen door. So a lot of times people have just a straight glass and they want to talk to you through the glass. The last approach that I would take on these would be, I would say, point to the door handle, is point to the door handle and take lead. I'm not even kidding. Don't say anything. Point to the door handle. And they're gonna be like, what do you want? And they'll be like, oh, hey, sorry to bug you. And then you'd go into your pitch. And that would be the other approach that I would take. The last approach would simply be like, hey, can we actually talk out here? Just confident. Hey, is it cool if we step out? Or is it cool if I step in? Hey, I don't talk through the glass. And just smile. Just be confident when you say it. And they'll be like, oh yeah, sorry. I wouldn't even, like sometimes they don't even realize. And they're like, oh, how rude of me. And then they open door. So these would be your simple approaches when you're dealing with gates, storm doors, things like that. But this is a common thing. You guys run into these situations every single day. It's super important to be intuitive with your approach through observation. You're already putting arrows into your quiver before you actually knock the door. What do I mean by that? When I look at a home, I already make an assessment. So let's pretend I see tinsels in the windows, I see tons of pots and plants, and it smells, the yard's well kept. I'm assuming what? It's this lady. right? So I'm going to approach this knowing that I got to go a little slower, knowing that I got to be softer tone, right? Knowing that I'm probably going to get an elderly person. Now let's assume that I see toys all over the yard, some shoes out front, bikes rolled in the front yard, and a football literally sitting there next to the door. I can now identify the age of the kids. I could identify maybe married couple. I can identify kind of like their lifestyle. It might be hectic. They might be cooking dinner. They might be running their kid to soccer practice. And now I need to know, okay, should I bring up, hey, you're probably super busy. I know you've got a lot going on. And I would approach things with that manner versus the elderly lady. She's got nothing going on and she's stoked to talk to somebody, but she's maybe a little bit more hesitant to talk to a stranger, right? So I'm assuming these things and being intuitive. And then maybe the last situation, I've got, Ohio State flag out of their front porch. Who's behind this door? This guy. So now I've got to bring my man card. I got to bring my macho-ness. I got to bring a little bit more, And all of a sudden he opens the door and you're like, hey man, what's up? And I'm like confident and I'm hitting him and he's an athlete. He's a sports guy. I maybe talk about, hey, did you see the game last week? And I better have know yeah, dude, we lost by 6. He's like, no, we didn't. We lost by 12. He's like, you didn't watch the game. Like, I don't want to be that guy. I need to know my stuff. So it's important that you pay attention and you're observing your surroundings so that you can cater your pitch to be relative. Pacing means you're in charge of the pace of the sale, meaning an older person that's maybe like kind of nervous, she's not ready for you to be like, I'm coming in. Like, hey, ma'am, sorry, I'm just going to step inside your home. I'm some random stranger. Some people open the door wide open, they step out, they leave a huge gap, and they're like, hey, how are you doing? And you're like, okay, I know I can move this one quicker. They're more receptive. But I need to know how to pace and time when I want to transition inside. When do I want to transition into product? When do I want to transition to XYZ? There might be times where I need to slow everything way down. And I'm going to talk about your family, your friends, your neighbors, the job, because it's like, hold on. If I push so fast on this one, that's going to ruin the sale. So it's super important you're the one choosing the pace and then mirroring what the customer is ready to be paced with. So you need to start with, okay, right when they open the door, their body language, their tone, their first reaction is going to determine how fast I move and where I pace. That also is going to be determined with my tone. So I'm going to be meeting them with talking a little faster because they're faster. I'm going to be meeting with them slower because they're slower. And pace is such an important thing when it comes to sales because it really is the journey a customer can follow. If they feel lost and they're like, what are you doing? You went too fast. If they feel like they can follow, that means you're on the right path. Repetition is not a bad thing. A lot of people are like, well, I already said that. You're like, understand customers probably only catching 20% of what you're saying. So sometimes the pace is go, repeat, go, repeat, go, repeat. And you just need to realize that's part of the sales pitch because you're introducing a new theory and concept to them. Creating urgency can be done in 3 places in the door approach. The first one is actually before the door when you're walking. I found a lot of salespeople, they really walk slow, like almost dragging their feet door to door. The more you can pace yourself and be like, I'm running door to door, and I know it might get tiring, but you got to get in door knocking shape. But you're already in your mind saying, I'm on a mission to get a deal. The second place would be in the knock itself. So sometimes people knock like, versus there's urgency for homeowner being like, whoa, what's going on? They're already putting them in a frame of like something's important. And then the third place would be throughout the actual pitch. Now, right when they open the door, hey, I'm really busy. I'm actually running to my next appointment, but I wanted to catch you before I had to see where I'm going. I'm like, I'm already creating, I'm in a hurry. We're doing this. And then using terms like today, what we're doing while we're in the area, while my texts are doing your neighbor, whatever that is, you're building urgency throughout the sale, letting them know I'm doing these now, not I'm trying to set up a time, like, you know what I mean? It's I'm doing this, not leaving flyers and brochures. So these are your 3 moments that it's important to build urgency because you want to get results. Presenters don't get paid, closers don't get paid. Now, this doesn't mean that you're trying to like talk faster. You want to be able to say, keep your cool, keep your tone, keep your pace. It's all about what your mindset is more so than the pace of words. If I start to get urgent by going, so what we're doing is we're gonna, and I start rambling like this, it shows I'm insecure. So my tone and my pace doesn't necessarily bring urgency, but it's the word choices that I'm using and how I'm doing it.
Yes, how could I help you?
Is your mom or dad here?
No.
Are you sure they're not here?
No.
That was a perfect example of a gatekeeper. You're going to run into this often. Now, it might not be a little girl like that, but it also could be a friend that's visiting. We're having a barbecue right now. They're not interested. You're like, you don't even live here. It could be the son. It could be something like there's so many situations that you're going to run into that it's somebody in the way of you getting to decision maker. And so how to handle that is you would look at the little girl and you'd be like, go get your parents. It's really important. And you would say it like that. Like you're almost a police officer, like banging down their door. And the kid goes, oh. Or if it's an adult and they're like, oh, no, my mom doesn't want to talk to you. Like, let's say it's an adult kid, right? And they just are still living at their parents, right? So it's like, you're like, no, I don't think you get it. Please go grab the homeowner. And you say it with like some certainty. They're going to be like, oh, what's it about? Yeah, no, I need to explain it to the homeowner. That is your approach on this gatekeeper. So don't back down and be like, oh, sorry, I'll come back. Like if you know homeowner's home, you go get to the homeowner. That being said, don't fight the gatekeepers. You want the gatekeepers on your side. So the more that you can play them on your team, the better. So you want to win them over so they can be your champion in a sale when you're like actually going through the presentation.
So what I believe you were trying to say is thank you.
Thank you?
You're welcome.
What? No. I didn't. I wasn't. Why would I ever?
You're probably wondering why we just watched that. It simply comes back to when you knock a door, you need to have this same attitude that Maui had. You're welcome. I'm here giving you an amazing service. I'm so dang confident that everybody loves me and I am in charge. I am the needed, not the needy. What this means is I'm not begging people to buy. I'm not sitting there some desperate broke A sales rep. I am sitting here confident. I am in charge. I am here giving you a great service and you should be thanking me. And if I come off with the attitude like this, hey, I'm just the info guy. I'm just here doing my job. I'm just, just have to do this with everybody. Like, don't hate me. I'm just reading the meter. I'm just, out here checking the sidewalk. Like I'm just doing this because that's what my job is. And I don't come off as some salesperson. The more that's going to create this curiosity and say, maybe this is important and maybe I should give him the time of day to actually listen to him. So if you, in your mind, think of the video we just played, while you're out there on the doors, it is going to help pick you up and it's going to help you come off as, I am the needed, not the needy.
And thank you.
My favorite compliment in the world is when a guy knocks behind me. Let's say they come back 3 months later, another rep was like knocking my turf, and they go, all these people are like customers, non-customers say, man, Sam, that guy that came by a couple months ago, where's Sam at? Like, if I were to do this, I'm gonna do it through Sam. And you're like, that sucks for the guy behind me. because I was that memorable. Like people remembered my name, they remember the interaction we had, and I was somebody that I chose to make an impact on a customer. My vision of a door knock is how do I, whether you buy or not, create an amazing experience through this whole situation to where when I come back, you're ready to buy, or whoever comes behind me, they're not like, those damn door knockers, like they had a good experience. And that doesn't mean I'm not pushy or aggressive or I'm passionate or I'm persistent. It just means I'm memorable. They know me because I was different than all the other door knockers. Bandwagoning is critical. It's so important to memorize the names, situations, professions of people in the neighborhood. You want to find, we call them the influencers of the neighborhood, and be able to leverage the name and status and situation of all of them. And the better you are at this, the better you are going to be at knocking. And your longevity in a neighborhood, so the more that you milk a neighborhood, the more you're going to get data from that. A lot of door knockers, what they do is they burn neighborhoods. They just knock one street once, move on to the next. Knock one street once, move on to the next. And it's all about how much turf can they get through. Where a good door knocker, it's how do I stay so consolidated? And the reason why they want to stay so consolidated is because their ability to bandwagon or use the names and momentum from their customer base. So proper bandwagoning is being able to actually use real names, not fake names, but to leverage a story of like, oh, you remind me a lot of Tiffany over on the corner. She's also got 3 teenagers just like you. That's crazy. Do your kids go to high school over at Peak High School over on 3rd Street with them? Like, they look like they almost play sports. Are they on the same football team? And how do you know that? Like all of a sudden they're like, wow, you know a ton. I want to be that guy. I want to feel like my favorite compliment is this. Ready? Customer looks at me and they go, oh, what street do you live on? Like, how long you been in the neighborhood? I'm like, I'm not from here. But they feel like I'm from their stinking neighborhood. I know that much about it. That's a good bandwagoner. So now that you can bandwagon, it's like, well, you're gonna forget. You're not a master like memorizer. So what I do is I carry a list with me of all my customers. And on that list, I will put their name and their occupation or their street number so that it shows like I actually know these people. I'm not just putting Jim Johnson, Mike Jones, like their real names. And what I do is I hand them the list and I say, do you know anybody on this list? And I literally say, these are all the people I've been working with. And so that I can show them I'm actually credible in a neighborhood. And the bigger and better I can make that list, the more I'm going to sell. And so maybe you start a new neighborhood, you don't have any customers, you don't know any names. There's 2 suggestions I would make in this situation. 1, use customers outside of that neighborhood. And you might have a customer 5 miles north of there named Steve Smith. And you'd put him on your list. So, and then you would say, hey, do you know Steve Smith? As if he lived right next door. And they're like, no. And you're like, oh, he just lives north of here, 5 miles. You don't need to say 5 miles, but you know he is a real customer. You know him. He got your service. He just happens to live far north because everything's relative. I mean, the North Pole is far, so 5 miles is not that far. Like he's just north of here, right? So that's one strategy. The other strategy is you're going to have to look up data from previous customers, right? So you want to get into your CRM, you want to drop pins, you want to kind of do some preliminary work to going into a neighborhood so that you don't knock one door. This is the worst thing you could do. You knock one door, you pitch them, you go next door and you realize, oh, their next door neighbor was our customer. You can't go back to that door and be like, wait a minute, I could have name dropped your next door neighbor and I didn't even know. You want to have some preliminary work there. And then the third thing that I would do is leverage your group or your team. When I sell a deal, I'm texting my entire group and saying, we just set up the chief of police, John Smith, and he has 3 kids and this and this and this. And I'm sharing the story and I'm sharing the data and why he got it. And I'm hoping for that in return. That way, as a group, we can use momentum in an area. So those are the 3 suggestions that I would make as far as creating your list, but it's important to have some kind of list you can reference. On top of that, the last thing I would mention on a list is you might go above and beyond and have video or written testimonials from these customers that you can then pull out of your Rolodex and be like, hey, do you know? And sometimes I would actually scroll through pictures of me holding a sign or me with customer, and I would say, do you know any of these people? And I'd literally start just swiping my phone. And they'd be like, wow, like, yeah, all these people have already done what I'm doing. And now I've created momentum through images. Or if somebody's like, hey, I'm not sure, like, drop the binder, and it's like, here, I've got all these people have already written testimonials or showing you testimonials of actual people that have gotten our service. So that would be how to really create a list. So oftentimes you're like, I'm a door-to-door guy, meaning the only type of sales I get are in the doorstep. That's wrong. It's all about how many interactions did I have. And so what happens a lot of times is, and you're gonna find yourself guilty of this, I promise. You're gonna be walking down a neighborhood and a dude's gonna be mowing his yard. You're gonna then go to the other side of the street just to avoid the fact that the dude's mowing the yard. You're gonna have to maybe talk to the guy. But then somehow, like in 2 days, you're gonna end up knocking his door and waiting for him to come home. Like it's so weird, but it's this mental thing of like, he just pulled in from work, he's sitting in the car in the driveway, and you're like, oh, I don't want to bug him. You're like, well, you're gonna bug him in 30 minutes when he's cooking dinner now. Like what do you mean you don't want to bug them when they're mowing yard or just pulled in with the kids and groceries? No, the goal of this is to say, how do I get as many interactions as possible? Therefore, it's not about how many doors you knock. That's a prime person, a human being. You should say, beeline, let's go, I'm gonna talk to them. And if you show that confidence and you're not afraid and shying away from that, it's going to help you obviously close more deals. So make sure to talk to people outside, and it's a great opportunity because those are your buyers just like people inside.